welcome in to a very special transfer portal edition of Three True Values. I'm your host, James Fletcher, and we are here to break down all the latest across college basketball. That's right, we are back. Took a couple weeks off through this off season as it slows down. We have NBA draft withdrawals complete. We have many of the transfer portal decisions already made. Just a couple loose ends to tie up across a couple of rosters in college basketball, but the core of what teams are going to do has been completed. Lots of money has changed hands. NIL has taken a leap to the next level. We have seen players go from blue blood programs closer to home, from mid-majors up to the Power 5 level. We have seen it all over the past couple of months, and so it is time to look back at which teams had the best off season. We're going to measure that in a couple of different ways. Here in the first segment, we're going to focus on the transfer portal specifically. We are going to focus on who teams were able to pull out of the transfer portal with a package. How many were they able to get? How were they able to fill out the roster? How does it mesh together? We're going to look at the winners and losers of the transfer portal so far. Then we're going to come back in the second segment here, and we're going to talk about the NBA draft withdrawal deadline. We're going to look at the teams that were the biggest winners and losers from withdrawal day. That will, of course, include winners whose players came back to college, and the losers there are going to be the ones who maybe didn't expect heading into the last month or so that their player would remain in the NBA draft, but now they have to try to replace him last second. Not many options available on the board. So that is what we will be breaking down. In the third segment, we're going to wrap things up today. We're just going to take a brief little run through of my way too early bracketology that came out over the last couple of days. We're going to run you through why some of the teams are high, why some of the teams are low, and wrap up the show. We will be back next week with an NBA mock draft special. We'll have Derek Lewis of On 3 joining me to go pick by pick. We did this last year. It was a big success. We're going to go through the entire first round. We're going to talk through what do the teams need? What do these players need along the way as we work our way down the draft board. Then the next week, we will have even more NBA draft content for you. And then, of course, it will be NBA draft time. So we've got a lot to get to here over the next month. We'll have weekly episodes once again. Took that little break. We're recharged. We're ready to go. So without any further intro, let's go ahead. Let's get into it. Let's talk about the winners of the transfer portal cycle in 2025. I think there's a lot of different ways to measure this, and so I'm going to preface the conversation that we're about to have. Obviously, you could just name in this era the top 10 teams in college basketball. You could look at the ones that brought in a significant number of transfers, and you could just name them. You could just be like, boom, that's the biggest winner right there. You want to talk about Auburn right now? I love their transfer portal class. Alabama has a good one coming in. You look at Kentucky, who absolutely loaded up in the portal. Louisville made some big splash moves early. They're all up and down college basketball. And so my biggest winners of the transfer portal are not necessarily going to be the top 10 teams in the rankings. There is a time and place. We will talk about them plenty all the way through the offseason. We already have quite a bit, but I want to get to here a couple of the teams that drastically raised their expectation for the season in my eyes. Teams that had gone from outside of the NCAA tournament conversation or were a complete unknown. All of the winners that I have here, all three, are first-year head coaches. And so they came in, each one retained one player off of last year's roster. So they had to build this from the top all the way to the bottom. They do so in the transfer portal. And I think as much as anything, what sets these three apart is that there is a clear vision in what they built through the transfer portal. Everyone is going to the portal, everyone is filling out their roster. But can you go out and can you land a point guard, a shooting guard, a center, some wings that all fit the same style of basketball without having to be crammed together and worked on over months and months? Can I look at the names and look at their reputation over their past seasons, however many that is, in college basketball, and understand what you are going for? Does it mesh with how you have coached in the past? That is the case with these three. And so let's go ahead. Let's start off the top with Texas A&M under Bucky McMillan. I think he has hit an absolute grand slam building his first roster in the SEC. I think this is a team that can, compete. I'm not picking them to win the conference by any means, but I think this is an NCAA tournament caliber roster right here. We start at the guard positions. We have Jakari Lane coming from North Alabama, just one of the best scorers in college basketball last season, of course, at the mid-major level. So you don't know immediately how much that's going to transfer. So who do you complement him with? Well, how about Marcus Hill coming from NC State, a guy who has proven he can score the basketball over multiple seasons at the high major level. Then late in the cycle, they get a surprise flip from Pop Isaacs, who has been a solid point guard for not just good basketball teams, but some of the top basketball teams in the country. Of course, he was committed to Houston. That all changed when Milos Uzan withdrew from the NBA draft, but it says something that this guy was committed to what was supposed to be the number one team in the preseason, and he flips to Texas A&M. So that backcourt, we're already talking about some really good scoring punch coming from the guard positions, some shooting ability too. Pop Isaacs, I think, is going to be able to distribute the ball quite well. Let's move to the center position where Federico comes in, another name established, veteran. He has been there and done that across the Power 4 level. The backup, Zach Clements, a guy who not going to stand out, but he's played spot minutes here and there for Kansas, of all teams, throughout his career. You look at more of the power forward position, but Rashawn Ajee comes in from USC. He had a good year, quiet year last year. I think that he is a good pickup as well. And then the wing position, we round out this roster with Rylan Griffin, who had a down year. Yes, he did not have the performance he would have liked at Kansas, but he has proven it in the SEC. He was a solid role player for Alabama in years past. And I think that there's every reason to expect that he could get things righted in the correct system for him. Bucky McMillan, not the same system as Nate Oates. Not going to say that. It is different, but it is more similar to the Alabama system than Kansas is running. A lot more tempo, a lot more up and down basketball where he is going to be able to use his athleticism, use the floor spacing principles that he understands, and create advantages. And Mackenzie Mbako, who I think sort of turned into the crown jewel of this transfer class. I do think that this is an interesting one because I almost think that Texas A&M could be in the category of winners from the NBA draft withdrawal deadline as well, just based off Mackenzie Mbako having a breakout performance. He shot the ball incredibly well across the G League Showcase and the NBA Combine. Really looked like he fit in. There was some question in the back of my mind, would he stay in the draft like some others that we will talk about later in the show, just based on how high his stock moved up. Of course, this is a former 5-star recruit. He has all the pedigree. It just never quite came together fully at Indiana. That roster, of course, was not necessarily tailored to bringing the best out of him. But now here he is, Texas A&M, up and down tempo. I mean, not unlike what we saw him do in those scrimmages. I really like his potential as a breakout candidate this year. I think he could be somebody who really shows that, hey, there's drastic improvement here from what we saw in the past from him at Indiana. And then, of course, you round out the roster. Josh Holloway is a guard who comes in who has experience with Bucky McMillan, played for him at Samford, and so you know that he's got a familiarity with everything going on. And Jamie Vinson comes in from Texas. So great pedigree up and down as we're talking about this. They did not just go get a bunch of mid-major guys and hope that they can compete at the SEC level. And the mid-major guys that they brought up, particularly, I'm looking at Jakari Lane here. That's somebody who I had been hearing for months and months was coming to the SEC. Didn't know what team, but he was a guy who was going to get into the SEC this season. Let's move on. Let's talk about Virginia a little bit and what they were able to do in this offseason. Thought it was really interesting. They got a little bit of a slow start in the portal. Things kind of snowballed slowly, but once they got rolling downhill, really like what they were able to put together. They have Dallin Hall, of course, at the point guard position. He comes in, brings them that consistency, that ball handler up at the top. He can shoot the ball as well. Malik Thomas. Now, this was one of the later moves. And so, like I said, it kind of snowballed. It got going downhill. Malik Thomas comes in and I think is the biggest difference maker probably in college basketball terms for Virginia. Now, we're going to get into there's one or two who might be better long-term prospects, players who will become better at basketball. But in terms of understanding how to succeed in college basketball, Malik Thomas has dominated the game in the past couple of seasons. He has played for San Francisco and been one of the best players on a team that has been on the fringe of the NCAA tournament at the mid-major level. So he comes in, he will be the scoring punch. Jakari White, he transfers in from the mid-major level. Another guy who had great production at his last stop. Of course, they bring in a couple more mid-major guys as well. Martin Carrere, Devin Tillis, Sam Lewis, all come with some pedigree, all come with a certain style, a certain fit with Virginia here. It's all about the names aren't jumping off the page for Virginia. But what I see when I look at this list is just guys who I can immediately pick out what is he doing in this new system? What is his role going to be? Okay, I know what Jakari White's going to do on the wing. I know what Sam Lewis is going to do. Devin Tillis has a clear role. Ugonna Onyinsu is the perfect example of this, the ultimate role player. Ugonna Onyinsu is out there to block shots and grab rebounds. That is what he will be asked to do for this Virginia team. As you look up and down the board of who else they have, his role is going to be carved out incredibly well. You don't want to ask him to do too much. Come set screens for your point guard, create space, and then dive to the basket. That is all you want him doing on offense. You don't want him to be out on the perimeter, ball in hand. We're making backdoor cut. Like, that's not his game. That has not been his game. So put him in positions to succeed, and I think that he can have an increased role, more productivity than we saw last year. And finally, I'm going to add in Johan Grunlow here. I understand that he is not a transfer. He comes over from the international ranks, but the international system has now been added into the way that we recruit college basketball. And I think it is more similar to the transfer portal than it is to the high school recruiting cycle. A lot of this is about picking out a name who you have seen production from, bringing them in to fill an immediate role as they look to either get a increased role overseas when they leave college or join the NBA. Grunlow is going to pursue an NBA career. He has got to get more reps, get more experience. That's why he comes to the college basketball ranks. He's going to play at Virginia, and I think he raises the ceiling of this team in a big way. Somebody who, if he develops, if he starts to understand the game the way that it is played in college basketball, could end up having a big impact. I think he's a guy who you can also play alongside Onyinsu. We've seen these two big lineups become a big deal at every level of basketball over these past couple of years. Virginia has a chance, if things break right, to repeat that, to create some success there. Finally, the last winner we are going to talk about here is Iowa, who, of course, brings half of the roster from Drake. And that means that Bennett Sturts is the headliner. Bennett Sturts is one of the best players in college basketball. He will be this next season. Great that they were able to at Iowa retain him, keep him from the NBA draft, where it sounded like he had real interest as a potentially high second round draft pick. And with all the withdrawals, who knows, could have ended up at the tail end of the first round. But they didn't stop there. Obviously, they go get his teammates Banks, Howard, um, Manyawa, Cale Combs. Lots of guys off of that Drake roster will make the leap to Iowa. And it's interesting because when it was just a list of these guys from Drake who were coming to Iowa, I had the same questions that I had the year before when they were D2 transfers coming up to the Division 1 level. And so you look at this roster and you say, okay, yes, they had great success at Drake last season. Obviously, they understand the system. They understand everything that they're trying to do here at Iowa. But where is the cap? Where is the ceiling of competition level? Because it clearly was not the jump from D2 to D1. We saw that go off with almost zero resistance. They made that leap quickly and efficiently. But can they do it again? Can they make another leap? Can they go all the way from D2, stop at Drake, and then to Iowa, where they're competing in the Big Ten? Bennett Sturts, I have no question about. Even Banks, Howard, I don't really question their ability to do that. But can they really bring, most of the roster and just flip it and keep moving up the ranks? We will find out. But I think that they created so much extra cushion for themselves when they added a Brendan Housen, who transfers from Kansas State, one of the best floor spacing wings we have in college basketball. Real gravity when he is standing out there on the three-point line. Defenders are not going to leave him, which is going to create more space for Bennett Sturts to work. That is going to be vitally important for this Iowa team, their ability to translate what they did at Drake to the Big Ten level. They have to create as much space as they can on the floor. That helps them do it. Adding Alvaro Folgueras is another big pickup. Fits immediately into what they are trying to accomplish as a team. It just brings it all together. You look at this and you know what the starting five is. You know who the role players are going to be. This Iowa team has very defined roles immediately. Just right off the bat, you know what role everyone is going to fill. And look, after what they did at Drake, I'm not going to question it until it turns the wrong direction. Two honorable mentions real quick. I do want to just bring them up. They didn't quite crack the top three, but Butler deserves a shout out here because I think Butler, while they might not have gotten from outside the tournament to, I think, a clear NCAA tournament team, a potential top 25 team, that's what we're talking about with these three above them. But they did go from well off my radar. I mean, I'm talking, I would not have considered Butler for an NCAA tournament spot to I've got them right there firmly in the mix. After they add Yame Butler, Jalen Jackson is going to be the engine for them on offense. Michael Ajayi, look, I understand Michael Ajayi. I was high on him last year. He had a great year in the West Coast Conference. I thought had an outstanding NBA Combine run, and then decides he's going to transfer to Gonzaga, play one more year of college basketball, build his stock a little bit more, and then go. Well, it didn't play out that way. He struggled to find a fit at Gonzaga and was really one of the most confusing situations all year for me. I could not understand how Michael Ajayi went from the player that I saw the year before, the player that I saw in the offseason process, to what we saw at Gonzaga. And so I cannot guarantee that he's going to bounce back in a real way at Butler because I haven't seen the same player that I saw before since. But If he can bounce back and be that type of player, I mean, the potential for this Butler team shoots up into NCAA tournament conversation. Because in the front court, they add Johan Traore, they add Drayton Jones. I mean, two just solid front court options into the mix. I really like this Butler team. I like what they were able to do this offseason. I think they gave themselves a real puncher's chance in the Big East to at least secure one of those spots on the bubble. Oklahoma also gets a shout out here. Not the deepest of transfer portal classes, but hey, Darian Reed, a very high upside pick there, former 5-star recruit. Nigel Pack, veteran point guard. You know exactly what you're getting from him. And then Tay Davis and Xavier Brown, both, I mean, you don't have to question where the production is going to come from on this team anymore. I mean, with this group of transfers, Oklahoma is going to have consistent production from a group of guys. They know where their engine is. And that's about as best you can expect from any transfer portal class as you look at it. As we move on, let's talk about the three losers that I have in the transfer portal. Now, this can be a combination of things. Obviously, it includes the outgoing players, it includes the incoming players. But I do want to focus mostly on how they were able to build a cohesive fit with both the current roster and each other. And the first loser here is going to be, and this might be controversial, but it's going to be Kansas for me. Now, I love the Melvin Council fit. I think he's a guy who can plug in anywhere. Trey White, nothing wrong with Trey White having him come in. I think he's a good, solid wing option. Jaden Dawson, a guard with some real upside. But the critics of Kansas over these last couple of years, as they have kind of lost their hold on this clear preseason number one. I know a lot of people had them preseason number one last year. I didn't see it. I really didn't. But there's been a call to add a GM role, to bring in a new assistant coach who's kind of running that portion of things, because as we've seen it go from year to year, we continue to lose something in Kansas's roster building strategy. I just can't quite put my finger on it, but it never feels like they're going out and they're landing a class that I applaud for how well it's going to fit, for how well it's going to play together. And of course, they lose to the transfer portal some guys who didn't pan out last year. AJ Storr is one of them. You look at another guy, Rylan Griffin, just didn't work. Just did not fit what they were trying to do last season. David Coit was a really late addition for them last year. He ends up gone. Zach Clements, a longtime staple, he leaves for another Power 4 program. And so what is Kansas's goal here to build around Darren Peterson? They have one of the top freshmen in all of college basketball, one of the top players in college basketball this season. Did they go out and maximize what he can be? In my opinion, no. Peterson is a shooting guard. Look, he might get some reps on the ball just to continue to build his stock, to continue to build and grow in his development. That's fine. But Marco Jackson is the only, Noah Shelby, I guess, but they don't go in the portal and get a solid college point guard who knows what he's doing, who can organize an offense. I mean, just look at what BYU did for AJ DeBonsta, the other top player in this class. Immediately, they spent whatever they had to go get Rob Wright from Baylor, who showed that he is the prototypical college point guard, going to get everyone organized, run the team. Kansas did not do that for Peterson. And so again, maybe they put him on the ball quite a bit. Well, if that's the case, then yes, Council, White, it makes a little bit more sense. You kind of you get a shooting guard, a small forward there. Flory Badunga, of course, they get back, so there wasn't a lot of worry about the center position, but there's not real depth at the center position now. I'm just not entirely sure what the strategy was in going out and getting three players who all play the two or the three. It just does not quite add up to me. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not going to have enough talent, that they're not going to be a good basketball team. I've still got them in the top 25. But I think that there was a real missed opportunity, of course, dependent on the NIL resources that they have. It's not cheap to retain Flory Badunga, to go get Darren Peterson. I understand that. But there are other players who are on other teams now who it just feels like if Kansas had put their name in the race, they might have had a chance. Also, some public swings and misses for Kansas here. Darian Williams, one of the most recent ones, ends up at NC State. There's not many wings left in the portal. So we'll see what they're able to accomplish there. Moving on, we've got Ohio State here. And I've seen some people who are a little bit high on Ohio State, and I do not quite get it. Now, I like Bruce Thornton. I like Junie Mobley. But this transfer portal class is just not standing out for me. Nothing wrong with Christoph Tilley, nothing wrong with Brandon Newell, but I think they both probably fit into the backup big categories. Same with Josh Ojenwona. I don't think that they went out and got a top center to help these guards. I don't think they addressed the wing position um, entirely well. Yes, Tayson Chapman and Devin Royal are on the roster, but you're really, really relying on some internal growth pretty much across the board after you lose Aaron Bradshaw, lose Sean Stewart, lose Michi Johnson. Now, all of those individual names, were they necessarily the biggest deal to leave Ohio State? Maybe not. But to lose them all and then to bring in the list that I just mentioned and Gabe Cupps, I just don't see how they got better. And this is a team that ended up not finishing entirely well in the Big Ten last year. We're not up there contending, not even close to a top 25 spot. So we will see if it comes together. I don't necessarily see the full fit, the full picture right now. But of course, with Christoph Tilley, a defensive center. And so if he can protect the rim and they can just be a solid defensive team, sure, they could have something there. Don't see where they're complementing their guards, though. Don't see how they're making the most of what they have on the perimeter. And finally, at Arizona State. Now, this is one where it was just going to be impossible. You lose so much off of the roster. Adam Miller, Amir Ali, Sean Phillips, Jaden Quintance, Brandon Gardner, Joseph Sanan, just name after name after name. If they weren't graduating, they left in the transfer portal. They have zero returning players at Arizona State, while Bobby Hurley is fighting for a job. And it's just not conducive to keeping your job if you are flipping the roster at this rate. And he's been kind of fighting for his position for the last couple of years. This year's roster, it's got a little ways to go. I don't quite see it yet. Quite a few mid-major guys that they're relying on a big jump from. They're kind of trying to sort the pieces out, put them together. It just feels like with the upside of Sanan and Quintance gone, you lose the veterans that you had. It's going to be a stretch to get this team ready, to get this team clicking in the right way. Don't see it for Arizona State, unfortunately, this season. I don't even know where to begin the analysis, because to me, it feels very much like some names on a piece of paper. Marcus Adams, I guess, will be the offensive hub, I would assume. But outside of that, I can't put together the vision at this time. Now, before we wrap up this segment, I do want to go ahead and spend a little bit of time talking about the three hardest for me to unpack. Because there are two of these that I think are winners. Like if we were to split every team in college basketball into winners and losers, I would call them winners. But I've also got some real questions about how how deep do they go and where does everyone fit together? I see some of the pieces where they fit together. Don't necessarily see all of them. We'll start with St. John's. St. John's is going to be a top 10 team in college basketball. There's no question about it. But you look at who they brought in: Bryce Hopkins, Dylan Mitchell. We'll start with those two. Those are the front court options. You bring in two power forwards, non-shooters from the three-point line, but both extremely talented. And you bring them in to play alongside Zuby Ejiofor, who's a similar type of player. So now you've got three players who are all kind of playing on the interior. What is the spacing going to be? I can't figure out at all how they're going to space this out. And are they going to get all three on the court together? I think there's a scenario where you could do that. You put Ejiofor at the top of the key. You end up with, let's see, I'd probably go Mitchell in the dunker spot, maybe Hopkins at the three-point line in the corner, and then just rely on him cutting to the basket. It's going to be interesting to see. I mean, this is super talented team. They're going to figure it out enough. The question is, can they figure it out at a level to compete for a national championship? Because last year's team lacked shooting as well, and it caught up to them in the NCAA tournament. And then at the guard position, you have Ian Jackson and Josen Sanan. Two guys who I'm very interested to see how they mesh together. Thought they both had similar up and down freshman campaigns. Both guys who were on the draft radar kind of fell off because of the lack of consistency, the lack of translatable skills that they were putting on display. And now you're going to put them together in the backcourt, and we're going to roll it out there and be super talented. There is no question about it. This is one of the most talented teams in the country. I think talent-wise, you might put this team number one in college basketball. And if you were ever going to pick a coach to be able to sort this out, to be able to fit the pieces together, it's Rick Pitino. And so I am not questioning Rick Pitino's ability to do this or his recruiting choices. I am just telling you that when I am trying to envision how this team is going to play, it is incredibly difficult for me to figure out how they are going to align and what the offense will look like. Similarly, we go to NC State here. Again, a big winner in the transfer portal. There's no question about it. Darian Williams comes in. Terrence Arsenault, Kadir Copeland. You got Vin Allen Lubin. They get international prospect Paul Mbaya. You look at Trey Holloman, a veteran guard who's going to kind of lead the line. Looks like they're going to let him be the point guard. And then some upside swings in Allen Breed, Jerry Dang. You got Colt Langdon there for some depth. I think that they're undoubtedly a winner in terms of the amount of talent that they added to the roster. The amount of defense that they added to the roster is also very fascinating. This is going to be a team that I think has real defensive punch. I don't think that they're going to give up a lot of points. But if you ask me, what is the starting lineup? Well, I mean, Darian Williams is going to be in it. I just said Holloman, I believe, will be in it. Probably Lubin over Mbaya, but I can't guarantee that. And then is it Kadir Copeland? Or do they go Jerry Dang? Terrence Arsenault? I would think, but he wasn't even a starter at Houston. So then what about Allen Breed? Does he get in that conversation? there's a lot for them to sort out with this talent. They bring in a lot of talent. Now it's time to sort through it and put it in a rotation. And again, it's Will Wade. I'm not worried about his ability to do that. That's why I'm not knocking them here. They're in this category because they did add talent. It's just a work in progress putting the pieces together now. At Ole Miss, a little bit of a similar situation. They go out, and I think for me, maybe the most confusing part of this portal class was just the fact that coming into the offseason, people, and of course, I not centered there anymore, but from Memphis. And so that's uh, just about an hour from Ole Miss. So you hear a lot about the Ole Miss program, about what's going on there. And whether it was just fan buzz or people in the industry speculating, there was a lot of, oh, Ole Miss they're ready to invest. They have one of the top NIL packages. One of the top NIL packages. Everyone wanted to tell you how much NIL they were going to have to spend. Well, then their big splashes were James Scott, which was kind of a late addition, and AJ Storr. Now, AJ Storr is a good basketball player. He has been a productive basketball player, not last year. But before that, he was. He's also developed a reputation as a guy who skips around for the highest offer. And that's not a jab at AJ Storr in any way. Look, this is a job market. If every year somebody was offering you more money to jump to the next thing, you would at least have to consider it. So I'm not saying anything about AJ Storr other than he has been in a lot of programs recently. And I wonder how that impacts his ability to pick up different systems. Now, maybe you could argue he's been in a lot of systems. This last one didn't suit him. So maybe he has learned a lot about what systems he does and doesn't fit in. Even more importantly, maybe Chris Beard learned what he does and doesn't fit in. That could be extremely valuable. James Scott, I think, is just a solid pickup. Like there's no question that was a really good pickup for Ole Miss. Corin Johnson, a little bit of an upside swing guy. Augusto Cassia, I think, is just a depth add for them mostly. Corey Chest, though, is an interesting one because when I saw the Corey Chest move, I thought, okay, so Dia slides into the 5, Corey Chest plays at the 4, and here we go. Well, then James Scott comes in. He's clearly going to play the 5. So then Malik Dia is going to play at the 4 position. That means Corey Chest probably, I would assume, is coming off the bench unless they're going to try to run him out there at the 3. Not entirely sure if that's something I would want to do. Think he's pretty successful at that 4 spot. Not sure if I want to mess with that. But as long as he's cool coming off the bench, being a 6-man, that type of thing, I think it could work. I think you could have some success there. And then Trent Perry is another one of these just upside swings. Yes, there were flashes at Kentucky, but there was also almost no role for him at Kentucky. I mean, it was very limited minutes, what he was doing out there. Now, everything that you did see in those minutes looked really good. But I'm not 100% sure when I look at his game that I can just pick out and say, yes, that guy is going to be a starting caliber point guard in the SEC next season. So we'll see how these teams and many, many more sort out their rotations over the next couple of months. They've got a little while to get things figured out. Of course, they'll have plenty of practice time in the run-up as well. When we come back, we will talk about the teams that were winners and losers at the NBA draft withdrawal deadline right here on 3 True Values. Welcome back in as we continue talking about the biggest off-season winners and losers this year. We're going to go through a little more briefly than we did the transfer portal winners and losers, the winners and losers from the NBA draft withdrawal deadline. And I think we have to start right off the top with Alabama as the biggest winner. I don't even think that there's much of a debate. LeBaron Philon had made it clear that he was focused on the NBA draft. He had made it clear that he wanted to stay in, that he was ready to start his professional career. And really, I had gotten a lot of questions, people asking me, what is Alabama's plan? Who are they going after in the portal? Who is going to withdraw from the draft that they're interested in? And I was like, look, it's been pretty quiet recently. Like, I don't know. And I'm sure they have something, but I haven't heard a lot. And then just before, minutes before the deadline to withdraw, Alabama's NIL collective announces that LeBaron Philon will be returning for next season. A huge retention for the Crimson Tide. Big news for them as they look to make another deep run in the NCAA tournament. And I think really kind of completes this roster. It does a lot to help build out what they have. They're going to be a little bit small, but I don't think that that's a major issue because they're good defenders where they are small. They will have, of course, LeBaron Philon. You'll have Aiden Holloway and Latrell Wrightsell at the guard position as well. Jalil Bethea, another guy coming into that room, maybe a little bit more of a wing, I guess, on this roster than a straight up guard. But Houston Millette also in that mix. They've got incoming freshmen as well. But I think that they did really well here in rounding out this roster by getting LeBaron Philon back. Now, if not for the shock and the just how big that news was and how it resonated, I think Florida would be the clear winner here. Because not only do they get Alex Condon, who I had a tail end of the first round kind of prediction on. I think not only do they retain him, which seemed like the likely outcome, but was still kind of up in the air because if someone gave him a promise in that first round, I'm not sure what he would have ultimately decided to do, but it definitely would have made it a tougher decision to make. Well, of course, they do get Ruben Chinyelu back as well. He was going through the process, shouldn't just skip over that one, but that one was pretty much expected that he would return next season. But here's how they compound that. They get their two centers back and then go get the best player to withdraw from the combine, Boogie Fland. Boogie Fland withdraws early from the combine, decides that he's going to go back to school, that he's going to look at which team had the best offer on the table for him. Florida quickly emerges as the leader, and they land a commitment. And so coming out of the NBA withdrawal deadline, they end up with Boogie Fland, Alex Condon, and Ruben Chinyelu. I mean, that is the start to a really good lineup right there. And that's just out of the conclusion of the combine. The last team that I do want to mention here is Auburn with Tahad Pettiford. I thought it was huge for them to get Pettiford back. Look, he is small. He's never going to be high up my draft board because he just does not have the size that we see generally find success in the NBA. Auburn has dealt with this in the past. They had a guy named Sharif Cooper, who was an outstanding college guard. I loved watching his game, but it just didn't translate to the NBA because of the lack of size. Now, Pettiford has a competitive streak. He has some different things that I think, if he continues to develop his game, he could be a guy who sticks in the NBA. I don't know to what level of stardom or what role, but I think he's got what it takes to be an NBA player for sure. No doubt about it. But to get there, it's going to take a little bit more development, a little bit more refinement throughout his game. He's going to get that at Auburn. He's going to get to be one of the go-to options where he was kind of a complementary piece. Last year, they had so many veteran guys, so many guys entrenched in their role that he was kind of asked to play his game within the construct of what everyone else was doing. Now it's a little bit more built out around him, and he's going to have a lot more freedom. He's going to be the point guard kind of running this team. And so I'm very fascinated to see how that goes. I think they have surrounded him with some really good pieces. I like what Auburn has done. I have them very high in my preseason rankings. And so to get Pettiford back was huge for them because there wasn't a ready made point guard option who they had already added to the roster. That would have meant they had to go out and compete. They would have had to get in the mix and probably dropped real NIL money on a Boogie Fland, a PJ Haggerty, someone like that in order to salvage this and get back to where they would have been had Pettiford just returned. So Pettiford returning, big for them, saves them a lot of time, a lot of energy, desperately scrambling to get a point guard into that system. Now we move on into the losers from the NBA draft withdrawal deadline. I think we got to start with Duke. I think that is the number one team that was the biggest loser of all of this because you lose Cedric Coward. Cedric Coward was a guy who maybe the public perception was lagging behind what the scouting was saying, what people in the NBA were saying. But it definitely caught up at the combine because you hear a lot more from those NBA scouts, either directly or indirectly, as they meet with media, as they talk with other coaches, and word starts to get out about who they like, who they don't like, who's rising, who is falling. So Cedric Coward goes from a guy that Duke fans are hoping, well, if he doesn't get a promise in the first round, we can probably get him to come here. Well, by the end of it, we're talking about him as a potential lottery pick. So that dream gets slashed. That goes away. They do quickly go get Dame Sar, which I think is a big pickup. Not just a 1-for-1 swap there, but I think it does kind of return some of the upside of what this Duke team is going to have on the wing. But it's no doubt it's a big blow to lose a guy like Cedric Coward. Now, if they had like a Cedric Coward and a Dame Sar, now we're talking about big time potential. This Duke team might have moved to number one for me. North Carolina, another loser. Drake Powell, of course, sticks in the draft. He decides to go through the process from start to finish. That was expected, but still hurts this North Carolina team that is just lacking a little bit more punch. It's a good roster. I think that it's a borderline top 25 roster. I just don't think that it has that kind of punch that it needs to take it to the next level. It's going to be very dependent on the freshmen, what they're able to get out of Derek Dixon and Isaiah Dennis. I think we all expect to get at least something out of Caleb Wilson, a 5-star prospect there. But if they can get a lot out of these freshmen, sure, they could continue to climb up the board. But I think it's going to take a big kind of burst onto the scene from that group if they're going to reach the top end of college basketball this season. I do really like the role players on this team, though. Don't get me wrong. This North Carolina team is one that I feel like has taken a lot of crap for not being star-studded. But, I mean, Henry Visar at center, Seth Trimble and Kyan Evans at the guard spots, Jaron Stevenson at the 4, Jonathan Powell as a wing rotation guy, Jaden Young as well can be thrown in that mix. They go get Luka Bogovic from overseas. I mean, this is a very reasonable roster. Like, this is a good top 25 type of roster. It's just, the standard's different at North Carolina, understandably so. And we wrap up this segment with Penn State, who unfortunately, I mean, they might have taken the biggest blow of anyone in terms of just what they were going to be to what they are now. Because they lose Yannick Niederhauser, and he was a guy, did not come in through the transfer portal. He was a retention that they had. And at a position, center, where there was already a shortage in the transfer portal. There were not big name, top end centers who were in the portal outside of a couple here and there. All those obviously quickly came off the board. All of those were already out of reach of Penn State. But the problem is for Penn State, because of the shortage that there was, some of the top teams ended up investing in the type of players outbidding what Penn State could have offered. To make it worse, well, Penn State's behind the 8 ball because Niederhauser's decision came so late. That means that they go from having one of the top centers in the Big Ten potentially to really lacking a clear vision for what they're going to do at center. There's not a lot of transfer portal prospects left out there. They're probably going to have to look overseas in order to get something done. And again, that has already been rated. That system has been picked apart for the top players that people want to get into their program. So Really tough position for Penn State. Probably wasn't on the radar of an an NCAA tournament spot, but they're definitely not now. I think they're going to be sliding even further back away from that pack of Big Ten teams. When we come back on the other side, we will get a nice overview. We're going to talk through what is going on with my way too early bracketology. And then we'll wrap up the show. We'll get you out of here and ready for next week. Thanks for tuning in right here on Three True Values. Welcome back in as we briefly just run through my way too early bracketology. It's up at On Three now. You can go check it out. Is on my Twitter page as well. I have posted it there. You've got the little graphic outlay, and then you can click and get the full field. Obviously, these are all based on my way too early rankings. Of course, behind the scenes, yes, I put out the top 25 every week, every other week at this point in the off season, but I have pretty much the top 100, I think, ranked in college basketball throughout the offseason. I'm always shifting it around, always moving teams up and down. So this is based on my way too early rankings, the way too early bracketology, which is now up in the air. Now, I went with the 68 team format because that's the only one that we have solidified answers on, but I did include which teams at least would be in a field of 72 or a field of 76. This comes after Charlie Baker, president of the NCAA, mentioned that he does want to look at conference expansion, or excuse me, NCAA tournament expansion. There's so much expansion going on in college sports. But NCAA tournament expansion, he wants to go from 68 to either 72 or 76. Now, exactly what that would look like is still a little bit up in the air. We don't have 100% solidified answers on what those moves would mean for the bracket, at least. Does that mean more 16 seeds are going to have to play playing games? Does that mean the bubble becomes more playing games? Probably going to be the 16 seeds who take the brunt of this, but it's still up in the air. It's still a conversation that is yet to be had by the NCAA's top decision makers. What they have made clear, though, is that they are talking about this potentially for 2026. So, if the tournament were to expand, I think, first of all, it's going to come in the next couple of months here because you've got to give teams time. You can't do this mid-season and just announce, hey, by the way, you've been fighting for this many spots. Now there's this many spots. That's just not going to go over well. So I think they've got to make an announcement over the next 3, 4 at the most months. Like, you don't want to be getting right into college basketball season before you announce it. But who knows? I mean, the NCAA's got a lot on its plate right now, of course. So if NCAA tournament expansion were to come up, it would change how the bubble looks, of course. So that had to be taken into account in the way too early bracketology. Off the top, the projected 1 seed line is Purdue, Houston, Duke, and Florida. That lines up with my way too early rankings. Not a whole lot there. If you want to see a little bit more of what I have to say, there's blurbs on each of those teams in the way too early bracketology, as well as my latest edition of the way too early top 25. So they've been covered pretty in depth. We've talked about them throughout the offseason. We've talked about a couple of these teams throughout this episode. The last 4 buys, though, let's go to the bubble. Let's talk about the teams that are here on the fringe. I've got Iowa, who we talked about here today. I've got Clemson, who I think had a decent but not outstanding transfer portal and offseason as a whole. And I think that with NC State coming into the picture, a couple more of these ACC schools starting to invest, trying to get back to where they were, I think it might just clip them a little bit, bring them down the board from being that third ACC team that was kind of the locks were Duke, North Carolina, and Clemson. I think they're going to have to fight a little bit more for their spot this season. St. Mary's here on the fringe. Look, it's the West Coast Conference. And I think with Gonzaga being the clear favorite, St. Mary's is always going to be in the mix. Yes, they lost quite a bit off of that team, but they still bring back Morauskas and some other key pieces. I think that they've got enough to keep going there in the West Coast Conference, the WCC, and make some noise. We'll see. I've got them right here on the fringe of the NCAA tournament. Not saying they're going to be outstanding, but I think that they're going to be a good team still, nonetheless. Oregon gets into this mix. They're right in this thick of it with these Big Ten teams that could go any direction. We'll see more of them as we continue down this list. In the field of 68, so this is going to be the last four in if we are in a field of 68. I've got Vanderbilt, Virginia, USC, and Kansas State. Now, Vanderbilt, of course, last year we saw a miraculous build of that team, just a lot of pieces that came together. We'll see if they can repeat that process because they lost quite a bit to the portal, lost quite a bit to graduation. Now it's a new group. Now they've got some returning pieces. That's going to be interesting to see. How does the continuity at Vanderbilt impact Byington's ability to build that program? I've got Virginia here. We talked about Virginia earlier in the show. Don't have to get too deep into them right now. But USC, another team, it's Eric Musselman. You know that he's flipping transfers in and out of here. You know that he's going big. He brings in Elijah Arenas, a star freshman. I think that's going to be the key. Now, Arenas had a car accident, of course, during this offseason. Seems like he is on the way to recovery. We will see if that impacts anything basketball related for him. Of course, his health is number one, but we will see as we move closer to the season, as we move into the season, does that have any impact on him? Because if it does, I think that really hurts USC's makeup, their ability to get into the NCAA tournament conversation. Kansas State. Now, this is one where Kansas State had a very underwhelming roster to me. I did not really see how a lot of the pieces were coming together. But then they add PJ Haggerty and Johnson towards the end as well. And you start to look at it and you go, okay, well, they've got some forwards who can score the ball. They've got a point guard who is volume scorer, does control the game quite a bit. I mean, All-American last year. And so I think that they get the nod here just because as I look at the other Big 12 teams that are around them, I can't put any of them ahead of Kansas State. And so if that's the case, I think that they can have a good enough record, a good enough body of work to get into the tail end of this field of 68. Now, we talk about a field of 72. So these would be the first four out if we do a field of 68, but they're going to be the last four in if it's a field of 72. We go to LSU, who, of course, we know invested big NIL dollars. This is Matt McMahon's last chance to show, can you coach this team to an NCAA tournament? He's under a lot of pressure. I think with the group that he has, they've got a shot. Now, it's never going to be easy because it's the SEC. That is a deep, deep conference. They've got a lot to overcome, a lot of teams to try to pass on their way to the NCAA tournament. Maryland, first year under Buzz Williams. Look, is there anything more first year of Buzz Williams at a school than being on the bubble? I'm not sure. Cincinnati, Wes Miller, again, under some pressure. They invested big in some of the aspects of this roster. I really like a couple of the areas that they were able to spend some money, but I think that there's a couple of question marks left for this Cincinnati team. What are they going to be able to do? Who's going to be that wing option for them? They've got some good guards. I think that their front court is solidified, but how much production can they get on the wing? That might determine what they're able to do this season. And Miami, who I think is just, look, it's year one under Lucas. They brought in some good, solid transfers, but nobody who I look at and I go, wow, that just raises their ceiling through the roof. Bring in the same thing, some good freshmen. And nobody who I go, wow, like he's going to elevate them. But they're going to be a good team, and they're going to be in this ACC that is revitalized, that is trying to push forward. So we'll see where they land this season. And then we have in the field of 76, which would be the next four out if we have a field of 68. That includes Georgia, who I think, again, did some good work. I like some of the names that they were able to add. It's just a depth play. It's a depth of the SEC play more than anything, them being listed here. Butler, who we talked about earlier in the show, we know very high on what they were able to do. SMU, who it feels like this is kind of where they're at right now in the development of their program. They're one of these teams. They're knocking on the door. Look, can they burst through to that next tier? That's going to be the key for that program long term. They've invested, and now they're on the right trajectory. But have they burst through yet? I'm not quite sure. I've got them right here in this category. And Ohio State, who I've got quite a bit lower than some other people I know, but talked about earlier in the show some of my issues with their roster, with the way that they're built. That'll wrap us up for today. Remember, next week is our mock draft special. We're going to go through 30 picks with Derek Lewis of On 3. You do not want to miss it. So be here this time next week. We will have that for you. Could be a pretty lengthy episode. We'll see how it goes. We'll probably speed through the last couple of picks, but we're going to go pretty in depth, as much as we can at least, on the NBA draft, picking back and forth the top prospects on the board. So thanks for tuning in once again to an off-season episode of Three True Values. This has been the Transfer Portal Special. We'll have the mock draft special next week.